I had to be tricked into a violin teacher. I have a good friend. I had a good friend who lived in Israel. He just passed by, unfortunately, 2 years ago. And he was one of those teenagers, who give you the impression that he didn't care them about anything. But he started bothering me. He said, I heard from your mother that you play the violin. Well, why aren't you interested in studying the violin? I said, I'm too old for that already. I was 17 years. He once uh, thought of a plan. He said, come, let's go to the movies. The movies were 3 kilometers away from our camp. Because we had to go to the movies, we had to walk 3 kilometers. So I said, okay, let's go. We stopped at a house. I didn't tell me anything. He stopped at the house and rang a bell. I said, what are you doing? It was on the way to the movies. He said, I have something to do here. So somebody angry looks from upstairs and he said, what do you want? So, you saw two teenagers and you guessed that they came from the DP camp. So my friend says, my friend wants to talk to you. I was shocked. I wanted to run away. Anyway, finally he thought it over and let us up. And then my friend told him that I used to play the violin. And, he asked me all kinds of questions. It was a long discussion. And he picked up a violin. He said, here, play. He was a very rough fellow. I started playing. I couldn't even, I was happy seeing a violin, but I couldn't, physically, I couldn't relate to the violin anymore. It was strange in my hands. So anyway, I played a little bit, and then he said, who do you have in the camp? I said, my mother, my sister. Tell your mother, he said, I want to see her right away. Let her come tomorrow. So I said, okay, I'll tell her. I came home, told my mother. My mother went the next day to him. He treated her, of course, like a lady, not as rough as he treated us. And he said, your son lost a lot of time. He must start immediately. Get him a violin somehow. And I'll start teaching him. And soon enough, I was lucky because a day after, or something like that, my brother-in-law met outside the camp a gypsy who was holding a violin case. He said, would you like to sell it? At that time, you could buy anything for cigarettes in Germany. So my brother-in-law said, okay, I'll give you cigarettes. Okay, you gave him a few packs of cigarettes, and I got a violin. You can imagine it was not one of the top violins in the world. And I started studying the violin. But as I started studying, the teacher started to talk to me about his favorite subject, Jews. And then I realized he was an anti-Semite, but I didn't take him seriously because I was only afraid of anti-Semites that kill, not those that joke. So I disregarded him. He liked me, so I went on. Then later I found out when he arrived to New York and stayed in our house, I found out he went to get some help from a Polish house. Maybe it still exists in Manhattan. I found out to a man that was in Warsaw at the time of the Nazis. And he asked his name. And when he gave his name, this man stopped and said, are you the fellow from Warsaw that went to the conservatory? Are you the violinist? He said, yes. And then I discovered that he was responsible for the life of a Jew that helped him in his studies before the war. Because that Jew, before they started the ghetto in Warsaw, was able to get to him and asked him, would you please take me to the forests where the partisans, the fighters are gathering. I would like to go there and not to stay in the ghetto, rather to fight. And so my teacher said, yes, come tomorrow. He came tomorrow, and there were two Nazi soldiers staying in front of his apartment house. and they arrested him and he was shot. After that, I told him, I was with him very frank, and I told him, I'm sorry. But now, although he had changed, I knew that he had changed. I'm not going to go through the story of how he had changed because everything is a long story. So, because I had a brother-in-law who lived in Lodz, which is Poland, and his family was killed by civilians. And when he came back from Russia, he couldn't find one alive. So you can imagine how he felt about Poland. So I told him, in view of that, I cannot take you in because of my brother-in-law. We live together, my brother-in-law, my sister, and my mother. So he went to Chicago. And one time I went on a tour to Chicago, and something told me I have to find out how he is. So as soon as I got to the hotel room, I opened the telephone book and found his name. I called him, and there was a very frightened voice saying, hello, hello. And he recognized me afterwards. And then he said, very bad, very bad. And then I couldn't speak to him much longer. I found out he went out of his mind. That was my first violent